favorite flavor crayon?
Ooh, I'm gonna go with orange.
All.
Lovely.
No, the question is what flavor crayon, John, and the
Whatever
question is
orange is.
all. All
Yeah.
flavors of crayon
All
are
flavors,
equally
okay.
good. As a
Okay,
Marine,
that's
we
what-
get
was
to say
Marine
that.
catered.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was Marine catered,
Yeah.
but you know what? You guys helped give me a different view of Marines with this conversation.
Welcome to Cocktails and Socktails, the podcast where
Cheers.
we make cyber relevant to everyone and unlock the stories of our leading industry professionals. I'm Megan.
And I'm Carly, and on today's show, we're talking about digital transformation with a couple of the hosts of Phoenix Cast, a podcast about cybersecurity, technology, and the innovation issues in the military. And they recently celebrated their 100th episode. Congratulations. And welcome, John and Kyle. What are you drinking?
Hey, thanks for having us. So I'm John, and I am drinking a very special one. Stone just released their Enjoy By, so I am drinking the Enjoy By 4th of July, which is a double IPA and absolutely lovely. And I did want to get out right away. I am active duty military and active duty Marine. The opinions expressed are my own, not official military Marine Corps policy.
It's
Love it.
vitally important that John gives that disclaimer. Hi, everybody. My name is Kyle. I'm also one of the co-hosts of the Phoenix Cast. I am drinking Mile High Spirits Fireside Pre-Mixed Old Fashioned, A, because I'm lazy, and B, because it's delicious. So for those of you in the greater Denver area, you should try to find this at your local supplier of all things alcoholic. It's great.
Fantastic.
Love
Megan,
that.
what about you?
I don't know. It's some cheap wine. It's like
It's my favorite type.
I don't. It's called
fair
like
type.
One Vine Day. My husband was in a golf tournament the other day, and he won like some type of basket for some golf type thing that he did, and he came home with this cheap bottle of wine. So we're drinking it. Whatever.
Effective.
Carly, what about
the old
you?
basket wine.
That's right.
You know what? The old freebies, the barrel of booze. I've got a new cocktail in a can, similar. Gin and Juice by Dr. Dre and Snoop
Oh.
Dogg.
Yes.
It
With your
tastes like
mind
the
on your
90s.
money and your
Wow.
money on your mind.
Laid back,
This is
tastes
compelling.
like the
Laid
90s.
back.
and it
Oh,
tastes
this
like
is
the
great.
90s. It's actually very, very good. I was a little skeptical. It's not super ginny and it's not super sweet. So
All right, you
It's
got to hold
pretty
that
good.
can up again. We got to get a screenshot of this for my
You know
next
what?
trip to Total Dab or whatever.
parental advisory. Recommended,
Yes.
right?
That's great.
Yes.
And then it's got the Chevy
Oh,
Impala.
Pretty amazing.
And they're all different colors based upon the flavors. Because I've got my prep work
Yes.
drink finished
Okay.
next to me.
Excellent.
Amazing.
So
I'm
Absolutely
learning
amazing.
so
yeah,
much
they're pretty
already.
look at that. We're here to serve. Okay, so before we dive into the Phoenix Cast,
Mm.
who are you and why do we want you here? So, John, I'm gonna ask you first. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I want you to do the segue for Kyle's intro into how you two met. Does
Outstanding.
that sound excellent?
We're going origin story, John. Let's do
Excellent.
this.
Yeah.
I can do that. So I'm John, a lieutenant colonel. I am currently a Marine cyberspace officer. I started as a Marine Corps communications officer. So as soon as I graduated college, I went to the Air Wing and provided communications to all the folks that need to support the aviators in the Marine Corps. And then from there, I went to the schoolhouse where I supported all the people learning advanced technologies. So I actually taught a couple classes for MCSA, MCSE stuff. So Microsoft certifications back in the day. Only a couple of those classes. I was mainly a Cisco instructor, and I also taught A+, Net+, Sec+, CISSP. So taught in the schoolhouse, taught thousands of Marines. It was awesome. That's where I met Rich, who's one of our co-hosts who's not here with us, and Kyle, who is here with us tonight. So met him there. And then after I finished at my schoolhouse tour, I went to a Marine Expeditionary Unit, which is where you take, give or take, 2,000 of your closest Marine friends from all across the Marine forces. So we have aviation, we have ground guys, we have logistics, and we have command element. And we put 2,000 plus Marines across 3 ships, one really big one and 2 relatively smaller ones. And that's how Marines can get to the fight pretty much anywhere. So that was the next rotation that I did. Really cool. And if you can imagine, the only way you can get communications is via satellite communications while you're on a boat which by the way goes like this, right? So it is some of the hardest stuff that you can possibly do, because as you probably know, satellite communications are not super easy. Getting the ones and zeros to go up to space and then come back, and then try doing that while you're moving on an ocean. And those humongous ships, like if you've ever seen an amphib come, it's like an aircraft carrier for Marines. So it's like a floating city, and it's shocking how something that big moves that much.
And it does not have a small bandwidth requirement.
No, it does not.
Uh,
So that was a really cool duty station, and really, really difficult communications. And then from there, I went to school. After school, I went to Marine Special Operations Command, basically at the same time Vishal did, one of your previous guests, and did somewhat similar things, although, I wasn't associated with aviation for that. And then after I did that, I went to school again. And then I got a really cool opportunity where the Marine Corps gives you out to industry. So I was given to one of the big banks in the financial sector for a year, where I helped secure the banks and worked on a bunch of different IT security efforts kind of outside of the military. It gave military officers a chance to see how the private sector protects themselves, so that we could get a kind of a different vantage point on things. And then if we're ever called in to support, it gives us kind of a hot start on that. And then after that, I went to Mar4 Cyber, where we started up the Phoenix Cast with Kyle, who's going to be the next one to talk.
Thanks, John. And I'll also start by saying, hi, everybody. My name is Kyle Mosquetto. No one ever can pronounce my last name, so I generally just go by Kamo. The opinions expressed by me are also my own, not those of my employer, my cloud provider, or any other businesses I happen to be associated with. And since, the drinking is required on here, extra special to say, it's just me, in my opinion on this. My background is also similar to John's. I was a Marine for 12 years, which is an odd number, and I'll explain why here in a second. But I started out as an enlisted Marine, where I was a small systems computer network specialist, I think was my technical job title in the early days. Made my way up to staff sergeant, and then I went to the dark side, as they say, became a chief warrant officer, which is, and for the record, anybody, I will fight to the death on this, the coolest job in the world and the coolest rank in the Marine Corps. We are like unicorns. You see us at the corner of your eye, you're like, it's chief warrant officer. It's the best. They're a very, very small percentage of all branches of the military, especially the Marine Corps. But I was a cyber officer, so I got to build humongous data centers in deserts and jungles and on ships all over the world. And when I got it, I was doing cyber network attack and defense packages, which sounds ultra sexy and is ultra boring. And that's a big reason why I kind of got out, was I got orders up to places geographically similar to where John is most of the time. And I said, that is taking me far away from tactical networks and far away from things I want to do. And so I did a thing that most people don't know is possible, but is absolutely possible. And I resigned my commission as a Marine officer, which is something that you can do. And
I've still never seen that since then.
I was going to say, yeah, I'm literally the only person I've ever met who has done that, which is a weird thing to say. Yeah, especially in the warrant officer community, it is unheard of. Like, if
is
you
it
make
because people usually go to retirement?
Yes,
or
that's it.
Okay, because I'm like, the only way for an officer to get out before retirement is to resign your commission.
Yeah,
and that's
it's
what
this
I
weird
had
thing.
to.
Yeah,
I was like, this sounds awful.
Yeah, when you're enlisted, right, you have like your fixed term, like 4 years, 5 years, or whatever, and you re-enlist and you get another 4 years or 5 years or whatever it ends up being. But as an officer, you just got to tell them, hey, thanks, I'm done. And it takes like 6 to 12 months for them to approve it and give you a date and to do the whole 9 yards. But that was that. And I basically just made the decision. I really didn't want to live in the greater Quantico area for the rest of my days and fight I-95 traffic all the time. And I was very excited for the tech I was working on. I said, you know what, I'm sure I can do this in the outside world and figure it out. And greatest decision I ever made was joining the Marine Corps. Second greatest decision I ever made was getting out exactly when I did. Not a day sooner, not a day later. And so I have gotten extremely lucky to land in some incredible spaces. My first job was running a giant global networking team for a very big global networking company. Then I got my dream job at the time, and I was the director of IT for CrossFit's headquarters agency for multiple years. I'm a huge CrossFitter. If you don't know, everyone who's involved in CrossFit has to say it at least 3 times in every conversation. And I've now checked that box, so we can move on. And then, there it is. And then I basically got involved in cloud technology in every way, shape, or form. So I built a bunch of clouds for that fitness company, and I did a bunch of stuff in AWS and fell in love basically with doing all the things inside of cloud technology. Got into DevOps, got into security, cybersecurity, worked for a bunch of different, mid-tier and VC-funded startups. And then I eventually managed to make my way to this really popular URL shortening company called Bitly. and I ran their entire infrastructure for a number of years. And it's a weird thing because a URL shortener is pretty much the thing that every person builds as their like final project in computer science when they're getting their associates or their bachelor's. But when you do it at billions of clicks a day, it's a whole other problem to solve. And so I learned a ton about scalable infrastructure and large scale system design and stuff, and then ran my own company for a number of years doing consulting for security and compliance, which is where John and I kind of got back together because John and I were Marines together for obvious reasons. And then I, got out, and me and John just stayed connected through our mutual love of fitness and cybersecurity. And when I started my own company, he kind of invited me over to be the first guest on the first episode of the Phoenix Cast. And I basically
And
just
you never
left. Exactly. I just stayed on the couch forever. And here we are at 100 episodes or whatever. But then I took that consulting company, I exited that, and we still helped a few customers for a number of years. I went to work at Google, where I ran their large migration program globally for a number of years. I had weird job titles there, but basically I just helped the largest, most complicated customers figure out how they were going to adopt cloud technology. And I've been in the partner ecosystem ever since for Google Cloud, which is, Google is a very, very high bar for hiring. And so they can't hire as much people as they need to help their customers actually do the crazy stuff that their sales teams tell the customers they can do. So I left Google and said, I want to go get my hands dirty again and get back close to the technology. And so I've just been helping customers figure out all things cloud technology ever since. And so that started out with a lot of like data center exits and AWS to GCP migrations and things like that. But now it's really just all AI, all day, every day, figuring out how to, implement large language models in some way, shape, or form to actually provide business value. So that's what I do. And in my spare time, I record this crazy podcast with this crazy guy. And I also do a lot of fitness still. And I grow tomatoes in my backyard, like at industrial scale. And so those are the crazy things that I do. And I also have like 3 kids, and my life is absolute chaos. They range from age 21 to 4.5. And
Holy smokes.
I
That
live
is-
in Colorado, which they're going to have to drag me away kicking and screaming because I love it.
All right. So much to unpack. All right. I have like,
I know,
I
where
like
do
to
you go
wrote
from
down
there?
like
Mhm.
5 more questions that are
Let's do
away
it.
from like
Let's do
my
it.
original like track of this. Okay, but before we go down the rabbit holes, get some more like up front. What is Phoenix Cast? How did it start? And like, what is your focus? And why do you guys do it?
Absolutely.
John,
Let me start-
you go
yeah.
first. Yeah,
Yep.
I'll come in.
So the Phoenix Cast, as you mentioned earlier, is a podcast about cybersecurity, technology, and innovation issues in the military. The reason why we do the Phoenix Cast is because Rich, this was the brainchild of Rich and a couple other folks, but mainly Rich. We started up Network Task Force Phoenix. And what that was meant to do was, give or take, create a matrix org across all these different pillars of excellence that we had in the Marine Corps. Marine Corps, even though it's small, is still like 180,000, and until recently it's 180, but it was 200K. And then when you add the civilians that are part of our network, we're well over 200, which I'm sure but just so that the listeners know. So we knew we were migrating to the cloud, and we knew the current infrastructure was not modern enough to support that. And so we said, okay, how are we going to get technology at scale in the user's hands? And we said, hey, we need to make a matrix org. It's the military, so we need somebody in charge. That's the 2 stars that you see on the logo there. So our 2-star general was the one kind of overall in charge of the whole thing. We matrixed an org and made it make sense with the authorities and authorizations necessary to do that.
Which is an absolutely insane topic that we don't want to talk about now, but just realize that
insane.
the
And
law
getting
that goes
people-
into this, nuts.
Right. And the military is built for people to be in charge. And the problem is all of these different things are little feathers of like, hey, I'm the person in charge of requirements. I'm the person in charge of acquisition. I'm the person in charge of network integration. I'm the person in charge of network operations. I'm the person in charge of what you maybe would see as kind of like initial security stuff. Different people in charge of all of this stuff. So getting a level of people kind of letting go of their feathers and putting it all together in a cap was hard. But then what we realized was there's a lot of this technology stuff that was very surface level. Like what is SAS, PASS, and IaaS? There were not many places that I could find that could put that into military terms so that general officers down to lance corporals knew what is this thing and why do I care about it in the military? That's where the Phoenix Cast comes in. So we knew we were going to be bringing a bunch of technology in, and we needed a way to put it in language and terminology that Marines would both understand and care about. And that's what we tried to do with the podcast.
And I want to highlight just for a quick second how insane it is that we were able to do this. Massive credit to John and Rich, both still active duty, who got with an incredibly competent, capable, and generous general officer who basically sponsored this whole thing and got it into existence. And for all the listeners who are out there, there's not a lot of military podcasts that are run by active duty people who are still in the military. And when we started this thing, there weren't any. And then if you would have gone to anyone in the outside world and said, hey, what is the thing you should not talk about on a podcast that's going to be public? They would have said, oh, cyber. Yeah, like don't talk about cyber. We're like, cool, we're going to talk exactly and only about cyber, right? And it's all going to be unclassified. It's going to be totally okay for us to talk about it. People would have told us that we were absolutely crazy and insane.
It still freaks people out.
Yeah, absolutely. And as it should. But for all of the mythos that goes into the sort of cloak and daggerness of the military and the secrecy and classification and all that kind of stuff, it's actually very difficult to get people that are not part of the same unit or same military organization to talk to each other about their jobs. I mean, when, I got out of the military in the early 2010s and that's still age of the internet, age of smartphones, all these sorts of things. But if you had someone who got orders and came from the West Coast of the US to a unit on the East Coast of the US, they might as well have had different languages they spoke. It was truly phenomenal. And we're dealing with like massive cutting edge things. And so this was a way for us to basically just get people talking about these concepts and do it in a way where we practitioners could control the narrative. And John and Rich and I had stayed connected for years and years about this. And so I was brought in as the sort of outsider, right? I'm the guy that doesn't wear the uniform. So I get to say a few of the things that are a little more controversial because, again, these are my opinions, not those of my employer or the organization I happen to be associated with. But this just worked out really well because I'm involved with customers all day, every day, like doing these things in cyber and protection and cloud and all these sorts of stuff. And Rich and John are knee deep in a lot of things that they're interacting with too. And so it just became this really great melting pot. And the feedback that we've gotten from active duty folks or folks connected to active duty and the number of listeners that we have still shocks us every single time that, we get metrics about these sorts of things. We've had an amazing audio editor who has volunteered their time for, years and years now, who does amazing work. And it's just the whole point of this was for us to be able to give back and get people talking about this in a way for us to share that knowledge with anybody. It doesn't matter if you're a brand new private joining the fleet or an officer who just got put in charge of a communications unit or a cyber unit that you maybe don't have that background in. Like we're giving you a primer on these things, as well as for John and I, especially, I think we get to talk about this stuff in a way that is very high level. I think that the unfortunate reality is that, and the Marine Corps has come a long way on this, and I want to give massive credit, but it's still a situation where it is a very private language amongst this very small group of people. So being able to open that conversation up to more is just really freeing. And I mean, from my perspective, having been out for over a decade now, like this is my way of helping give back in addition to all the volunteering that we do with veterans organizations and things like that. But it's wonderful to just stay involved and also just keep giving perspectives on how the things in the military still apply to you when you're in the outside world and vice versa.
Yeah. And two things I want to add real quick. So the logo and the Phoenix reference is based off of Gene Kim's The Phoenix Project. If you have not read that book, you need to. It is amazing. And one of the things I'm really proud of is guest-wise, we've had Lance Corporals, which is one of the lowest enlisted ranks. We've had Lance Corporals as guests all the way up to 3-star generals, ambassador at large, CEO, best-selling authors. We've run the gamut from kind of like the low to the high, and we like to think of ourselves as pretty much accessible to all.
I think that's amazing. And I think what you guys set out to accomplish is things that we see. I mean, Megan and I definitely, but you see anywhere in any business, especially in the federal government and the military, is you have to be able to touch that breadth of experience from, just, coming into the organization. This is where you're learning it, to people who have been in for 30, 40 years, sometimes stuck in their ways, but then across different Job. You're laughing. I say stuck in their ways,
I
but
just-
it's true.
We haven't
The
come
culture
across that
change.
yet.
No, I was laughing at how hard John was trying not to smile in that moment. Like I watched every muscle in his neck tense up.
And I mean, so I think the fact that it's been so successful to bridge that gap, to share that message, and that it's being like listened to, because that awareness, like educating, telling people when change is coming and what this change means and how to be able to adapt to it is one of the hardest things to do. One of the hardest things. Like I always say, the tech is easy. Getting people to adapt to the tech is the hard part.
I think
Yeah.
that's true in any industry. I
Mhm.
mean, yes, military, but broadly, even outside. I mean, it's kind of like when I came into this field, I touted that my biggest strength was that I was a new dog and I didn't know any old tricks. And moreover, that I didn't have these ways that I was stuck in, and that I was very quick to admit, I don't know something, let's like figure it out as fast as possible.
Yes.
As opposed to being stuck in this cycle of like, oh, I've been around a long time. I've got to appear like the most authoritative, or like, well, we've always done it this way, so we have to continue to do it this way, and I touted as one of my biggest strengths that I'm like a new dog. I'm like ready to learn all the new tricks, and I don't have that, old philosophy. Thank you both for your service. I always try to take a pause and thank our service members when we have an opportunity to discuss them with them. You mentioned that you're bringing people together, and I love to hear that. How do you know your demographic? I mean, do you have people that approach you and say like, "Oh, I've listened to the podcast"? Like, you have, young Marines approach you. Like, what is the listener demographic? And I mean, how are you accomplishing that, and how are you realizing what your metrics are?
Yeah, so one, we have somebody who we announce at the end of every episode, kind of does our public affairs stuff. I have never uploaded a single one of our episodes. So one of our public affairs people does that. So anytime I want to know the metrics, I just ask them. But the program that we use gives us pretty detailed metrics. I've got a personal website, and so I know basically every request that you make because of all the browser cookies and the whatever. Pretty much everything about everyone, like what is their gender, what is their region, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have download metrics that tell us all of that stuff. I do think ours are skewed a little bit because everything's behind a military proxy, if anybody listens at work. But, I can't provably say that. But I would also say just at work, we get recognized by a lot of people. I've got a pretty distinctive kind of like a high-pitched and unique voice. But it's funny because at work, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Schreiner. I'm not John. And so every once in a while, it's so funny. And it's still shocking to me. I'll be given a briefing or talking to somebody or a group of people or whatever, and I'll kind of go through whatever I'm normally doing at work. And then I'll say, listen, but this is just John's opinion. Don't worry about it. And then you can just watch it go across several eyelids. They're like, I knew that from somewhere. Because in the military, we don't really have first names. That's our rank. You don't hear anybody calling me John, but it is pretty funny watching it click for people. It's like, ooh, that John.
So interesting.
It's been really weird to see the number of people who have reached out about it and the number of doors that it's weirdly opened. When we first started this, we were just, I won't say we were like interviewing our friends, but we were interviewing a lot of folks who just were involved in that community in a lot of ways, right? That we were both personally connected to. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, hey, so-and-so, so-and-so's aide is reaching out to us. And we're like, oh, I'm sorry, someone's aide is reaching out to us? Like, what does this mean? And all of a sudden it was like, we had our first general on the cast, then we had our first 2-star, then we had our first 3-star, then we had our first like deputy. And then it was just these weird things. We had, we have requests from people that, want to be on the cast, and we're actually very protective of access to the cast. We're also a nonprofit. We don't make any money off of it. It's a military funded and military sponsored podcast. And so it's very important to make sure everyone understands that. Like, John and I don't see a dime out of this. We buy the logos on our cups and stickers out of our own pockets, and we pay the fee out of our own pocket for the podcast recording software and all that kind of stuff because we love doing it. But we aren't going to interview like foreign nationals, and we're not going to interview folks
Sure.
who are, ranking military members that aren't part of, U.S. alliances and stuff like that. But we do end up having a weird collection of folks that reach out and want to be on the cast in some way, shape, or form. And it has, John, I know you feel the same way, but it has shocked the both of us how popular it's become. And people want to reach out and like figure out, oh, what's the latest episode that you guys are doing? And we tell them, and they're like, oh, that sounds awesome. And I'm like, I love that for you. Like, it is awesome, but it also feels so strange to talk about this in like everyday conversation with folks.
It is bizarre.
Yeah.
So I feel like you're doing something that, like, at face value, would need to have been authorized by somebody for you to do, and it hasn't been. And you come on and you say, these are my opinions. These are just like how I, think of the transformation that's happening and the problems we're encountering in the industry. Are the ranking folks that come on, the generals and so forth, I mean, do they provide the same kind of disclaimer, or are they kind of speaking on behalf of the Marine Corps? And like, how do they think about that, knowing that their audience is a lot of soldiers?
Yeah. So a couple things on that. There's not, and it's kind of weird in the personal setting, which is what this is. There's not an explicit, let's put it in firewall terms. There's not an explicit allow for this.
Sure.
There's kind of like a, hey, and I do have to declare it. Like, I have to tell people, hey, I am doing this. But there's no form that you just submit and get permission for this. And then the other thing is, there is not super clear guidance. So we have public affairs guidance, but like anything else, or like think about anytime you've done a digital transformation. Yeah, you were given a document that has requirements, right? But like, did that tell you what you needed to know?
And
then
they're more
when
like
you talk
guidelines,
about-
really.
Right. And then when you talk about IT and cyber and there's not a book for this.
Wow.
So, we've got some general things, but Rich and I are active duty lieutenant colonels. And the reason we're active duty lieutenant colonels is because we possess the judgment necessary to be able to make these types of decisions. But to a certain degree, there is a little bit of like, you need to be careful with this. And so we are. And then when it comes to, and Kyle, I'll kick it to you in a second. When it comes to the generals coming on, some of them have wanted to, and they've been like, hey, I am coming on and we're going to talk about this stuff. And it's like, cool. And then some of them have, I've asked them to come on, and I work very closely with their executives and public affairs folks to make sure that the stuff we talk about is the right and appropriate things and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And to John's point, none of this is codified, right? And there's no manual for any of this. But the way I always think about it is, we trust each of these folks who are on this podcast with a weapon system, whether that's a physical weapon system or a cyber weapon system. I'm comfortable giving them a microphone and knowing that they're going to do the right thing and not say anything super dumb.
Yep.
Or
But
you
also-
hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
or
I
we
mean,
don't.
and listen, that stuff
Or do
happens,
dumb
but
things.
yeah.
I mean, we've had people come on that we don't agree with. And those are some of the
Oh,
most
yeah.
fun podcasts.
Great. Absolutely.
And that's okay too. But one thing that we do different, that is a little bit different than journalists, is we provide our guests the questions ahead of time. Our thing is not like, we're not because we're not monetized and whatever, we're not a clickbait type of podcast.
Mhm.
So we're not looking to
Yes.
catch you, like, oh, I got the Microsoft person to say whatever.
that's
That's
and
right.
That's going to be my line, and we're going to get 1 million clicks on that. Like, that's not what I'm incentivized by. In fact, I am incentivized by the exact opposite of that. If something went clickbaity, I'm going to be super concerned.
Yeah.
So we stay away from that. We provide questions ahead of time, and every guest that's come on, we've offered them the opportunity. Hey, if you don't like something that you said, we'll take it out. That isn't used very often, but it is out there.
Yeah, and again, we're just trying to give like a good feedback loop to the field and to the fleet to say like, hey, here's topics you should know about, right? I think that, John, I can't remember what our count was, but it's like, 10 to 20% of our podcasts are actually reaction casts to like leaks or vulnerabilities that have been announced, or CVEs or mega breaches. And we break it down. Like, we do a very high level forensic analysis of like what happened and why. And we try to give actionable takeaways and like, hey, this is why this was super dumb and you should never do this. And, it all
Yeah.
kind of comes down to the same things every time, but it's really fun to look at those environments and just get people thinking and having a discord around what happened here, why, and what can we do to try to not to make the news next time.
That's really interesting. Like we have kind of a similar, like you're making cyber relevant, right? And you're doing it in that context of like military jargon and requirements that are specific to the DoD and the Marine Corps. But I feel like it's the same. We kind of have the same purpose, which is like making it relevant, bringing it forward, unpacking it, simplifying it. And I love that. That's very cool.
Untangling the web that it is.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's very few things in our world that affect every single person as much as their cyber preparedness in some way, shape, or form, where we just don't educate about this, right? We sort of joke that our parents can't figure out the VCR or some way, shape, or form, and it's like, well, I'm really worried about their 401k password, and I'm really worried about their social security information and their identity, and them not giving away their bank information and all this stuff. And it's just like we're just trying to keep as much education out there into the world so that we normalize this, right? Like I actually want to talk about password management software with my family at Thanksgiving. I really, really do, because I want them to know that this is important and it's 2024 and they need to have something like that in place. Where at the same time, I feel like the minute you start talking about cybersecurity or something, people just tune out. They're just like, oh, you're a mad scientist and you work with stuff I can never understand. And it's like, no, this is totally approachable. Totally approachable.
The number of times that I'm asked, what is it? What do you do again? Like, I don't know how to explain it to people. I'm like, I'm trying to like break it down Barney style. Along that same note, have you guys heard of that movie, The Beekeeper, with Jason Stamos or
Jason Statham?
Jason,
Yeah.
or John Stamos, which are two very ends of the
not
spectrum.
John Jason Statham.
It's Jason Statham. Not only have I heard about it, I've watched it.
Because it's exactly that. It basically takes everything that like Jason Statham is great at with the kicking indoors, but it has that cyber element of this like elderly woman that he's renting like a room from gets hacked, and he does the door kicking in stuff to take it down. And it was
That's what I'm
I had
talking
no
about.
idea what it was about when I went to go see it. And I saw it was Jason Statham and that it was or I'm gonna get his name
They
wrong every
kicked
single
over
time.
his beehive. And
Yeah,
he brought
exactly.
it to
Exactly.
you.
That was it.
As
Beehive
only
kicked.
Jason Statham can, and he brought it cyber too.
I have this
It
Wikipedia page up right now,
Yeah,
and the movie poster for this is just chef's
It's-
kiss. It's
And,
so good.
and you would not think that it was like cyber related. And I was sitting there and I like texted my aunt and I was like, this is everything you and I get upset about like with grandma, like all the time.
And oh, by the way,
Yes.
there was a really good Darknet Diaries podcast episode about something like this as well. So the nice thing is cyber is making its way into so many different media now,
Yes.
which is super helpful.
No, and I think what you guys are doing, like I know it kind of started with a purpose for the transformation that you were working on, but I think transformation's never ending.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just continuing. So continuing that conversation, talking about what's top of mind. Right? Like I listened to you guys, your most recent like AI episode with Donovan, that program.
Yes.
And I'm like, write them down. I gotta call them. Like I want to learn
Mhm.
about this like
Mhm.
program because it can be in the secret cloud. Like what?
Yeah.
Unheard of so
Yeah.
far. And so that was super cool. But like it's continuing to happen. So like educating people on these continuing things. So there's so much you can't stay on top of it. So the format that you guys do it in is an easy way to at least kind of get a little bit of an understanding so that when people do start to see it or talk about it at their business, whether it's military or not, and that starts to come up, it's not this big, scary unknown. And I think that's really incredible.
I am super thankful for noise canceling headphones and lawns because I believe they are two of the most popular things for our podcast. The number
Agree.
of people who've told me, I just got done cutting my lawn and I heard you talk about blank.
Yeah. Yes.
amazing.
Yeah. That's got to be the number one pastime of a podcast listener for us is lawn mowage of some way.
Or may I say, DC traffic.
Oh, yeah. I
Oh,
mean,
I found the end of the internet.
yeah, I
DC
don't
traffic
commute.
is not cool.
I don't commute anymore, and that has literally destroyed my podcast listening.
I
Yeah.
will turn on podcasts when I will put an AirPod, whatever, in and make dinner.
Yep.
And my family comes in and the kids are yelling and screaming, and I'm totally submersed in this thing. And my husband will get in front of me like, hello, like there's kids, like, what are you
Mhm.
doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm fully engaged here.
I may have done that as well.
Yep.
I have a question that is like very top of mind right now, and it's kind of for John, but I'm also interested, Kyle, your thoughts on it. John, you did a training with industry, you mentioned in your intro, in the financial industry, and so I
Yes.
always am curious with people from the military who do the training with industries, like what have been the biggest takeaways about things that are happening in the private or even in some cases the public sector that are absent in the military that you feel like are like best practices, or like, wow, they're doing that so well. And you might not
Yeah.
be able to talk about it in any like real depth, but like, what are some of the most stark differences?
Sure.
Well, I
Yeah,
think-
I did actually write up an entire blog post about some of this stuff, so I'll shoot that to you and you can put it in the show
Yeah, that'd be
notes.
great.
But to hit some of these things, one of the things that deeply frustrates me is routers in the military process the same packets that the ones in the civilian world uses. In fact, we're using the same routers. We are using the same routers and the same
Great.
servers and the same Microsoft operating system as
Great.
everyone else is using. Like, there's not a military specific one. So it's a little bit frustrating to me, where I think there's a little bit of a perception of like, you know what a computer is? It's like, we have all the same stuff you do. So that's kind of a little bit frustrating, or as you translate things for people. But I think one of the, to get to your point, like, what are some of the differences? There's an FSISAC and an FSARC, and I'm going to violate my number one rule by not having an answer to this definition. Financial sector, something. But there are groups across the financial sector where all the different banks will work with each other. They will share vulnerabilities or exploits that they've seen happen, bad IPs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they'll work together as an industry because they realize that while they are financial competitors, they're an industry that needs to kind of like work together to have the best defense. So I think that's really cool. And that's not to say that the Marine Corps and the Army and whatever don't work together, but we don't have standing orgs that are specifically designed for that type of stuff. And so I think that's really cool. And then one of the big powers that they have is we read the book Good to Great, and I was pretty frustrated because one of the main takeaways is you got to really be careful about who you hire, and that's where you need to put all your focus in. And it's like, cool, I am given people. I have no play in this whatsoever. So if I need a AWS or Google or Azure SME tomorrow, and I'm in the civilian world, I can go buy that. I can't go buy that in the military. I have to make that. And then you have to think about the sustainability of that, of like, can I justify always having a Microsoft SME? And even if I could, can I grow them and scale them within the organization, et cetera, et cetera? Like, these are really challenging, like in the moment, easy to solve problems. Long-term, sustainable within the organization problems, not easy. And so I think the civilian world has the ability to just be like, boom, hire, boom, fire. And they can turn on a dime, where for us, when you get into kind of like the, hey, I took a junior enlisted and I got to get them all the way through the pipeline to retirement based on the stuff that we've trained them, or retrain them and come up with programs for that. That's a challenge that is not arbitrary. So that's one of the things I would take. The other thing I would take is we did something called, where I was at, we did something called skip levels. And I've heard several other people do that as well. That is generally not a thing in the military. If you went to your lieutenant colonel and was like, hey, I'm going to go talk to the colonel about this, even I would kind of be like, are you going to be doing that?
Bold move, Cotton.
Yeah.
Bold move. Let's see how it works out for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I might be patient for that, but I know several that would be like, you will stand there, 6 and center, you will salute, and then you will tell me what exactly is going on right now. Where that's commonplace in industry. And I think there's a lot of power in that. And just kind of a more loose architecture. So I think those are some of the biggest strengths from there. The rest of the stuff, again, the packets are the packets, the way we do things, like we do all the same stuff. We call it different things. I didn't find the technology to be novel or different. I found the organization to be slightly different and the management styles to be almost drastically different. But it also comes with strengths and weaknesses too, right? While it may not feel like that, my experience was if you want to get a decision, the military is far faster than that. Because in the military, I need to convince one guy. Where, and depending what your culture is, especially if you have like a consensus culture, there's a lot of people you need to convince. And spoiler, as you kind of like move that to the N number up, your skills in needing to talk people into things and sometimes make a very complicated problem simple and with everybody's different kind of way about it, that gets really challenging, where I don't have that challenge in the military. I have one decision maker. It's pretty much written in writing who that person is, sometimes legally, and it's pretty clear how to get a decision out of them. There's probably some kind of acronym for a type of board that you do to get that decision. So while it's super rigid, it can be super fast because you know who it is and how to get it.
And the dichotomy of that gets really interesting as well. Like, you can get a decision quickly in the military. Like I worked at Google for a number of years, and the sort of inside joke was that accomplishing anything at Google is medium hard, right? You want to like invent quantum computing, medium hard. You want to change one item on the menu at lunch in the Boulder Cafe, also medium hard, and will equally take the same amount of time. You know what I mean? Or like change the font on a website that is internally facing, medium hard, will still take you 2 years. And it was all the meetings of the meetings of the meetings. Well, at the same time, you can get the decision made. But I think one of the biggest weird things that people mistake about military acquisition cycles, that once the decision is made, actually doing and accomplishing the thing is, and John, again, opinions are my own, an incredible long amount of time to actually see the thing actually happen, right? Like, you want to buy a new router and you have the budget and you have the decision, great. It'll be there in 2027 because that's how long the acquisition cycle is going to take. By the time the new, uninterruptible power supply gets to your unit, the battery will have expired. And the very first thing you'll need to do is order a new replacement battery, which will take you 6 months. And so it's these like weird, crazy things that kind of go along with that. And John mentioned something here that I want to, as the person who's not active duty, say, which is the hiring and firing and staffing problems that exist within the military are very, very difficult to solve. We are very empathetic to the challenges that are faced with both the legal statutes, the social statutes, and the processes that are already in place on this. But, and I'll share a personal story here. Like, I have interviewed for 2 very senior positions in the U.S. Cyber Force. And one of those positions, it took me 170 days from the day that I did my interview to get a single lick of feedback. And it was over a year before I was told, we've moved on with a different candidate, with no feedback whatsoever.
I have also moved on with a different candidate.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
And it's just like, well, yeah, of course, it's been a year. I just assumed you had died or something. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't assume that this process was functional. And at the other time, I was disqualified because when I graduated college, again, over a decade ago, where I was literally getting my degree while I was forward deployed in Iraq, so I did distance education to get my college degree, I didn't take calculus, and so I therefore wasn't qualified for a technical job in the DoD.
We have some weird things.
Yeah.
No, I used to work like for DoD, so the acquisition process, 1,000% know exactly all of that. The hiring process went through all of that, or not just for me, but trying to hire people, and it's really, really painful. And I feel like sometimes it's like, I don't want to say it's done purposefully, but it's done to the benefit of some others versus to the benefit of the mission.
Yeah, there are reasons.
Let's common sense this real quick. Like, you don't have congressional mandates in your hiring process. And then the other thing to note is you got to add security clearance on top of that kind of mandated pay
Right.
that you already have. And so,
Yeah. And but at the same time though, right? It's insanely difficult to get the right people hired, I think, in that place. But I have been, with extremely rare exception, impressed as any human can be with the average capability of any Marine. Like the fact that we take the most wide cross section of socioeconomic backgrounds, political backgrounds, you name it, and it is the melting pot of United States culture, comes into the system, and through boot camp and esprit de corps and the way that the Marine Corps operates, empowers these folks to kind of kick butt, take names, and chew bubblegum at every possible opportunity. Like, I have still yet to meet a Marine in the cyber forces where I'm not like, holy crap, you're amazing. Like, you did this with the most basic levels of education that could be provided to you, and like self-education through all these crazy things that are going on. And I mean, again, some of the military training programs that I've been through are phenomenal as well, especially when you get closer to like the cutting edge of cyber and some of the things that are in offensive and defensive cyber. But the people are amazing. Megan, you'd mentioned earlier, the technology is the easy part. I agree 100%. It's the people and the process that are hard. And the Marine Corps has, and the DoD in general, I think they have some of the best people. And so I think they've solved the people problem in a lot of ways. While again, it's easy for me personally to complain about the hiring process and all that sort of stuff, but the average stock of the people that are involved in this process day in and day out are 10 out of 10. Like great driver, 5 stars, would ride again, clean car, whatever you want to say.
Yep.
At the end of the day, it's just phenomenal. And then the process is where things get just off the rails, right? And every place has its own unique problems with process and how you actually do anything, but the technology is pretty much the exact same. The people are worlds and away amazing and awesome in the DoD, and especially the Marine Corps. I think the Marines have the best people, but me and John are, John and I are obviously biased.
Biased. Way
yeah.
biased.
And the process is just off the rails. If you've never been involved in government process before, it has a reputation for a reason. While at the same time, it gets the job done when it needs to.
And so with, I think this kind of answered one of my next questions about like the hardest part of doing like a digital transformation. Really it'd be anywhere. But so when we talk about that, and we talk about the, continuing evolution of technology, where do you see technology and missions crossroading? Right? Megan and I we've talked about this with some of our like counterparts before, but like where do mission and technology intersect? Support like streamline, make efficient, etc. And I mean, I know Kyle, you've been out for a while, but you still have like that knowledge and experience from your previous. So I'll have you start, and then we'll let John give his opinion on that.
Ooh, yeah. Technology and mission is actually bleeding a lot these days. You hear all these stories about, people buying commercial drones off the shelf and, sticking duct tape to them and using them to launch strikes against folks. And that is a really romantic visual. But at the same time, the forward deployed Marines that are out there right now have incredibly awesome drone technology that has gone through the rigors of military testing and does some truly amazing things. And they just store it in their backpack and they whip out an iPad and they're able to control that thing in the middle of the battlefield. I remember doing the very first, to my knowledge at the time, multicast video feed from a UAV in a combat zone that went across terrestrial microwave towers to go like hundreds of kilometers away when I was in Afghanistan in 2010, and that was like mega cutting edge. And now it's like, no, I just literally throw.
How did you do that? Magic.
Yeah, it was magic. Like I have pictures of me and the team that did that. We look like we had just like stormed Leningrad or something. I mean, it's just crazy. But now it's just like, you reach into a backpack, you pull out this thing that weighs a couple ounces and you throw it and it goes and you're connecting to it via, wireless communication technology and you're able to see what it's seeing. So just the ability to take modern technology and apply it to the warfighter, I think is something that the Marines do exceptionally well. And they do more with less at every stage of the journey. And that's where I think the mission capabilities are coming to play right now, where John's involved in things day in and day out that I will never know about as someone who's not inside the military anymore. But what I can tell you is ingenuity is key. And taking the technology that is out there and available to be used and leveraging that for the betterment of the warfighter and the betterment of national defense is something that I have no doubt that the Marines are going to marry the mission with that new technology at every step of the journey and do it in ways that, frankly, stress out people like the lieutenant colonels but at the same time are all in good keeping with the best traditions that we possibly have and making sure that we are doing right by way of the warfighter.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not making us nervous, then you're not trying hard enough.
Truth.
So
that was my whole job as a warrant officer.
Yeah. Yes. Well done.
Sure.
I'm going to deviate from the Marine Corps line here. So generally, Marine Corps is going to say we need digital transformation. We need technology to make us more lethal. I think that's half of the equation. The other half is we need technology to make us not spend our time on stupid things. So when it comes to writing assessments, why do I not have an autofill? Why can't I say, Kyle, I need initiative, super technical, physically fit, spit out an assessment, and then I tweak a couple things. We spend so much time in administration. We cannot, in my opinion, effectively leverage data, analytics, etc., to make data-informed decisions easily. We can do that with a Herculean amount of effort and normally contracted support. Being able to do basic day-to-day tasks quickly and efficiently so that we can free up the cognitive space to think about the ways that we're going to become more lethal, but also to think of the ways that we can make behavioral change that does not require lethality. If we could free up a couple CPU cycles for those things, that's what I want to see from digital transformation. And that's what needs to get just basically easier. It's too hard to do something that's not that difficult.
So
I
I
thought-
can't, we can't leave here without asking you about how you're thinking about AI in terms of augmenting our cognition. You, Kyle, talked about it. You're building with AI. AI is the buzziest thing. Obviously, that's true in our space as well. How are you both thinking about AI, its kind of practicality? Like, is this something that we need to be afraid of? Is this something that we're excited about, that we're preparing to embrace? I look at it as, something that is going to help close the cyber workforce gap is something we talk about all the time. And the speed and efficiency of our operators to be able to, work and triage events and so forth. How are you thinking about that and how it applies to the military and the broader technology workspace?
You want to go first? I don't know.
Yeah,
I could talk about this for a long time. So
I can go. Okay. So
Okay.
I think of this as two ways. With my cyber hat on, I would like to see AI make it so that instead of my analysts bringing a bunch of data sets together and being able to try to derive their own correlations, I would like to see AI make bringing data sets together way easier and provide several different potential correlations and where they got that correlation from, and then letting my analysts sit back and stew on, do I agree with this correlation? What I know from over here or my lived experience, can I explain that a different way, but not have to be like, oh, this packet is smaller than it's ever been after this type of packet, and them having to go through terabytes and terabytes of stuff to find that one small packet. I want AI to tell me this packet's small like this, and I want my analyst looking at it being like, is there a reason it might be like this? Or based on these 4 potential AI provided reasons, do I think this is one of them? I'd like to see AI do that for me. That's kind of like on the cyber hat side. And then on the kind of like operational hat side of things, I would like AI to help me bring disparate data sets and different thought processes together and allow me to visualize those. Because when I can visualize, I can bring correlations together that are nearly impossible to do otherwise. You can look at as much Excel as you want to, but when you can put that into a dashboard and overlay, then that's where it becomes like, okay, that's what that is. But there's just too much. There's too much, and in the different formats and whatever, it's too hard. I need AI to reduce my man hours for those tasks.
Very interesting. Kyle, what about you?
All right. So on our podcast, at the end of every podcast, we have this thing that we do where we do Rich's knife hand. Because John is the
This is
John
a knife hand.
Yeah, a knife hand is a thing in the military where you're talking to somebody and you don't like point your finger at them. You have all of your fingers extended in a knife motion.
It's dangerous.
It's like,
Gotta
hey
shoot it.
Marine, why is your uniform not fitting or whatever? It's like, hey, what are you doing? It's the knife hand. It's this legendary thing. So Rich does his knife hand and I do my hot take. And my hot take is usually designed to just like summarize the episode in a way that's sort of thought provoking. And so this question's really good. And so Megan, thanks for asking it. And I'm going to give a little bit of my own context on this. So
Sure.
humans with robots are going to continue to outperform humans without robots the same way they have since like the invention of fire, right? Like you can look back at every major modern advancement in human technology and we've never like gone back an age in any way, shape, or form. And it's always been the folks who adopt that technology the fastest that prevail and the Luddites who generally do not. I tell every single person in every single industry that if you aren't trying to figure out ways to use AI to do your job better every single day, in every single way, you are not looking at history. And I'll say this, I am using a dozen AI tools every single day in every single way that I possibly can to save me time. Because to John's point, I need time to think. I need time to meet with people face to face and help identify what's going on. And I think cybersecurity is a sport that I've always described as player versus player, right? A lot of things that we do in the IT space are human versus machine or human versus problem, right? Cybersecurity is none of those things. Cybersecurity is you on a keyboard against somebody else with a, 6-pound organic computer sitting between their ears, trying to get their keyboard to outperform your keyboard. And because of that, I think that, we shouldn't be afraid of this, but we should have a generally healthy respect for the speed of compute power now that has been paired with natural language and how AI is great. And if you log on to, Google's Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude or, whatever tool you're going to use, Meta's Llama, those are awesome. And I'm glad that people are using that. But if you haven't started to play around with multi-agent patterns, you're missing the point, in my opinion, right? A multi-agent pattern using multiple LLMs in concert to talk to each other to get results from things is what I think very few people are talking about in your day-to-day life. So there's like an open source framework from Python called Crew AI. I recommend everybody go play with this thing, but you can basically get a bunch of LLMs and you can choose your model and you can choose the method that you want to do this to talk to each other and solve problems for you. And so in the cybersecurity space, this is where I start thinking about how do we create defensive systems that are multi-agent based, that allow multiple agents to talk to each other to help solve those problems, right? To John's point, I think about how we are going to use artificial intelligence to basically do a pull request. And if you're a writer of code and you submit a pull request, it goes through a review and it shows you like the diff of all the code. If you're going to review someone's code, it's like, oh, they edited this and they modified this. So to John's point, it's like, hey, why is, this packet looks weird? Why? And then you have 5 different agents that all answer the question in unique ways. And then they come back and they go, hey, we all agree that this packet looks weird because of this data that's over here that this agent analyzed and brought back to us. And we've also had the validator agent go back and double check that agent wasn't hallucinating, in this trust boundary that goes along with it. And AI is going to fundamentally change everybody's job like that. We are going to get to a point where, to John's point, a lot of the minutia is going to go away. If you work in a job, this is another, again, weirdism, but hear me out. If you work in a job where in the last 2 weeks you have ever had to have one document open on the left side of your screen and another document open on the right side of your screen and be checking those, you're out of a job. You don't know it yet, but you are. And that level of cognitive awareness is what I think is a little bit missing. And I'm hearing in the industry right now a ton this, we got into this AI hype cycle at the launch of ChatGPT, which to my calendar was like 16 months ago now. It's not a long time for the record, right? Like an average cyber operator wouldn't even be through their basic MOS school yet. Just use that as a little comparative. But that's how long it got launched. And there was AI hype cycle. And now I hear people being like, oh yeah, customers aren't really figuring out how to put this into production. And there's this AI skepticism cycle that's now coming into play where people are sort of like, maybe this isn't as big as they thought. And I just want to respond to those folks and say, tell me you're not using a lot of AI tools each day without telling me you're not using a lot of AI tools each day. Because I'm telling you, I have been a technologist for 2 decades. I still think that most modern technology feels like magic. I tinker all day. I have a server rack of Raspberry Pis in my house that I use every single week for something, right? Like I mess around with stuff all the time. I play with stuff all the time. I'm endlessly fascinated by this. And I will tell you, this is 100% the future. And everyone's going to have an AI in their pocket. Everyone is going to have AI doing the basic stuff that they don't want to do anymore, so they can free their brain up to think, to interact with other humans, to do the high value tasks, right? But all this sort of knowledge work that we've been glorifying and obsessing in the IT industry for a number of years, that is on its way out as we know it. But I think the future is even brighter. And I think that this is going to create far more jobs than it eliminates. And I think that we all are probably grossly underestimating, even with our most optimistic things, something that's going to be a daily part of life for all of our kids from the minute that they can figure out what's going on. So anyway, I mean, that was a long rant, and I'm sorry, but yeah,
you did
Nice
ask me all
job.
about
Way to
AI,
end
so-
it. Yeah.
yeah. It's
I mean-
awesome. Like, what an amazing time to be alive, right? Can you imagine trying to explain this to someone just a couple decades ago, right? That this is going to
Just
be
try-
reality.
Just try explaining it to my grandmother. That's how it is. That's
Yeah.
the point. But it's
Lord,
like you
help us.
said, it's not if, it's when, and it's not taking all of our jobs. It's adjusting and adapting so that you don't have to do that minutia work. And that's what people, and like you said, it's in everything. It's just, what is that AI? You know, generative AI is that new buzz. But AI has been there. You have
It's just ML.
The
It's
ML,
better
yeah.
ML. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
It's better machine learning. And look, you want to be the human with the robot in this example. That's the key, right?
Yeah.
Like,
you want
learn.
to be the human with the robot.
And I'm gonna say this is my last thing because I know we have a hard stop here and I gotta go. I got a toddler to tuck in, but at the end of the
Same.
day, this stuff is not hard to learn, and it's getting easier to learn every single day. So anyone that's out there and feels intimidated by AI in any way, shape, or form, just go take a class on prompt engineering. There's 100 out there, right? Find anyone. Go to Udemy and spend $10, whatever it takes, right? There's YouTube courses you can take for free. Go learn prompt engineering, and then from there, I don't know, go use it to do whatever you like best. You're into gardening, ask it questions about gardening. You're into cars, ask it questions about cars. You have a large family, ask it questions about how to make up a bedtime story that's customized to your kid. Ask it to produce you coloring pages for your kids. Like, ask it to do a million things. The possibilities are literally endless, endlessly fun, and free you up from so much work. So that's all I got.
Speaking of kids,
Speaking of
well,
bedtime stories,
Oh,
gentlemen,
yeah.
all right.
it
It's
has been
time.
a
Well-
pleasure to have you on this evening. Where can we
Yes.
find your podcast?
You can go to any podcatcher that you have and type in Phoenix Cast and look for this logo, and you will be able to find us.
Perfect. Now, we typically end, I just have two, we have called rapid fire questions. Top of your head, not serious. I got two of them. Favorite flavor crayon?
Ooh, I'm gonna go with orange.
All.
Lovely.
No, the question is what flavor crayon, John? And the
Whatever
question is
orange is.
all. All
Yeah.
flavors of crayon
All
are
flavors,
equally
okay.
good. As a
All right,
Marine,
that's
we
what
get
was
to say
Marine
that.
catered.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was Marine catered,
Yeah.
but you know what? You know, you guys helped give me a different view of Marines with this conversation. But last one, least favorite CrossFit workout.
This is easy answer. Kalsu.
What is that one?
Kalsu is 100 thrusters at 135 pounds for time, but every minute on the minute you have to do 5 burpees.
Oh,
Fuck,
what's the
dude,
one
fuck
that's
that.
150 wall balls? That's my
Karen.
least favorite.
Karen,
Karen.
yeah.
Karen is my least favorite.
John
Nobody
is
likes
not a
me.
tall Marine, and so
I
150
am
wall
not.
balls is a thing. Is the thing.
That's a no for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Oh,
Least favorite.
well, I hope we can have you guys back because there were so many more questions, even beyond this, that I would love to ask. We'll send both Megan and all of y'all to go put your kids away, and
Go
my
check
dog
in
has
the
been sleeping.
toddlers.
So.
All right. Thanks for listening to Cocktails and Socktails, the podcast where we make cyber relevant to everyone and unlock the stories of our leading industry professionals.
And thank you again to John and Kyle for joining us. Check out more on them on Phoenix Cast. We'll put more details in the notes below. You can find Megan and I here at Cocktails and Socktails on YouTube. So make sure to subscribe, like the video, and hit the notification button so you never miss a beat. Cheers!
Cheers. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, guys.
Kyle, thank you.
Thanks for having us.